this is not looking good for John Kerry or even for President Obama, certainly in the House. And I think John Kerry has made a huge mistake, and I hope he too can find a way to back off and use his skills, his energy, his influence to find diplomatic solutions.
Are they too far in, though?
No, I don't think they're too far in. I think that they can gracefully say that they are listening to what the American people and the world community are saying, and they are going to show us the proof. They are going to take action against Assad if indeed he's responsible for this. But most important, I think they have to say that they understand the world community is saying what is going to be the best thing to decrease the violence in Syria. I also wish that they would say that we are going to do more for the refugees, because 60% of the needs that the UN has to help the crisis of the millions of refugees has not been met. The needs that the UN has to help the crisis of the millions of refugees has not been met.
Here is Lloyd from Illinois, Republican line.
Good morning.
You're on. Go ahead.
I'm a conservative Republican. I've been a conservative Republican my entire life, and I am very much against this war. I've called my Congressman, Adam Kinzinger. I encourage people in the district to get his number online and call his office. He has come out in support of this war, and I want him to change his vote. We still have boys coming back from Afghanistan in body bags. We do not need another war. I'm very angry about this. It has nothing to do with President Obama. I've never been a supporter of President Obama. I admit that, but this is about going to war, and I'm against it. And if my congressman expects me to continue to support him, I've donated in the past. He's wrong. He needs to change his vote, and we do not need another war. Frankly, I can't believe I'm agreeing with somebody from Code Pink, and I've even put a little no war sticker in my car, for crying out loud. But this is just wrong. We don't need it. We ought to be getting out of Afghanistan at a minimum before we go into any more wars. And again, I'm very upset. I don't usually call into shows or call my congressman or do any of that stuff. But this has it's really hit home. I do not want this war, and I guess that's all I have to say.
Well, within my own family, we have a quite the spectrum, and to my relatives who might be watching that are great supporters of the most conservative part of the Republican Party, I must say they called me and said they were very proud of me, and this is the first thing that we've agreed on politically in a long time. And so I feel that caller's intensity, and I appreciate that what he is doing is calling into C-SPAN, but more importantly, he's calling his congressperson. And this is what we're calling the people's insurrection. This is the people's peaceful insurrection. And anybody that's listening, call your congressperson. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are going to be absolutely critical days. And if anybody is near the D.C. area, wants to fly in, come and join us. We're going to be across from Congress, across from the Longworth and Cannon buildings every day with a vigil out there to have a physical presence. And we're going to be sending people inside to make visits to their congresspeople. So let's really build this people's insurrection and stop this war.
Several have asked this morning about where you get your funding and how much is spent on bail and travel.
We have about 200,000 people who have signed up to our list, and we encourage any listeners who like what we're doing right now to sign up, and you'll get a weekly alert. And then we put out calls for donations, and we get tremendous generosity from our supporters, especially at times like this.
Legal fees and all that included?
They're not allowed to actually pay for our legal fees. We have to pay for that personally.
Tom from Washington, D.C. Independent Line, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for taking my call on C-SPAN, and thank you, Ms. Benjamin, for being there. She's a breath of fresh air and a real voice for the American interest, which I believe is peace. Now, your previous caller from the Foreign Policy Initiative is on a board with likes of Robert Kagan, Bill Kristol, Dan Sr., who was a foreign policy advisor to the Bush administration during the Iraq War. These were all guys that were pushing the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Miss Benjamin, I'd just like to say, I've been watching you over the years, and you've gotten it right every time on Iraq. on Afghanistan, on drones, Pakistan, Yemen, Vietnam, the chemical use of weapons in Bahrain. I've just been watching it happen over and over, and these guys that are tax-exempt organizations like the Foreign Policy Initiative, that they keep pushing wars, and their agenda is they're an offshoot of the Project for a New American Policy, New American Century, which we know got it all wrong. Now, Ms. Benjamin, I'm really frustrated because I see that those people in Congress that were those people that were voices for peace in the previous years and that were pushing against the Iraq war, pushing against getting us out of the war in Afghanistan, are now the same voices that seem to be wanting to be for this war. And I'm just asking, what can I do as a person to help bring about a nonviolent end in Syria, and how can I stop this war from happening?
So, caller, let me end you there only because you're starting to break up. Medea Benjamin, go ahead.
Well, I think the caller brings up so many important issues about who are the people in the past who've been pushing this war, like the war in Iraq, and why do they continue to hold positions in think tanks and be invited onto TV shows to be experts now when they have been getting it wrong for the last 11 years. I think we need to have fresh voices out there who are leading the think tanks. And I think in terms of Congress, it is a shame to see some of the people who I think under a Bush administration would never be in favor of this and are now leaning in that direction. For example, the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, Keith Ellison, I don't think he would favor this under the Bush administration, but he is favoring it now. And I know his constituency in Minneapolis is very pro-peace and very upset with the position he seems to be taking. But there are others in the Progressive Caucus, like Barbara Lee, who have been a consistent voice against war and continue to be. There are new people like Alan Grayson, congressman from Florida, who has just been absolutely terrific on this issue. And in terms of the caller saying what he can do, remember, you not only have a congressperson to pressure, you also have 2 senators and push those. And I would say if the caller is anywhere in the D.C. area, come join us outside of the Congress and be part of this physical presence, because we should also be on the streets as well as in the suites.
R. Harrington asked you what if this turns out to be another Kosovo? We could save innocents.
Well, I think that should be done by United Nations action. You know, the U.S. doesn't have a very good track record of helping things in the Middle East, and the U.S. doesn't have the world community behind it, nor does it have the moral authority these days after the chemical weapons that were used in Iraq, after the torture of people in Abu Ghraib, the use of drones that have been against international law. So I think we are not the country right now to step in and say you must abide by international law.
Traverse City, Michigan, on our Democrats line. This is Dwayne. You're on with Medea Benjamin. Go ahead.
Yes, this is the first time I ever heard of Coal Pink, and I appreciate this lady's comments, and it sounds like she's doing the right things by following her convictions. But my concern, I majored in history in college, and a lot of the stuff like when Adolf Hitler was rising to power and Germany was invading other nations, and when the Holocaust came about, there was a lot of denial of that. And even today, a lot of the Germans will deny the Holocaust that even existed. Now, we have a chemical, the pictures obviously show that something horrible happened over there. And if we can't just ignore all this either at the same time. I'm for peace. I'm with her. I'm for peace. But yeah, on the other hand, how do you deal with something with this? And you talk about the UN. Russia has a veto there, and we're not going to get anywhere in the UN because apparently Russia is supporting Syria with military, and maybe they even got the chemicals from them. I'm not sure, but thank you. And I do appreciate this lady. I think it's good. More people should be involved in government like she is. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the caller's concern, but this is not like a Hitler there is no attempt by the Assad government to invade other countries. This has become a civil war, and it's become a very complicated civil war. And I think that the American people and the world community, still have not seen what actually happened there. We want to see the evidence that our government says it has. Why is our government keeping this evidence away from us?
The
Why is it
classified evidence.
the classified evidence? Why should it be classified at this time? If the president wants to convince the American people, Congress, and the world community, we got to see a lot more evidence. But I still would not be convinced with evidence that a U.S. intervention which defies international law and defies the wishes of the Secretary General of the United Nations is the way to go about it. But I do think that if there is this overwhelming evidence, perhaps then we could convince the Chinese and the Russians and the rest of the world community that is not in with us that something must be done, like taking Assad to an international criminal court. But we have to look at what would actually help the situation and hurt the situation. And I am 100% convinced that a U.S. military intervention would hurt the situation.
One more call. This is Mike, New York, on our Republican line. Mike, go ahead.
Hi, ma'am. How you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Good. Listen, I too want to thank you for what you do. Basically, when I called in, I just asked the simple question of what's the means? What's the end game for us? Can we invade? I mean, what's the game plan? In order to go to war, you need a game plan. Because if you don't have a game plan, then everything's just going to fall apart. It's going to cost a lot to the taxpayers. There's going to be a lot of innocent lives lost. And I'm a former Marine. I did serve in Iraq. And, I am, I don't agree with war, but sometimes it's unavoidable. But again, we need a game plan. And there is really no reason to go into Syria. And, I don't even think that we would go into Syria. It would probably be some type of bombing campaign. But what next? Who are we bombing? A lot of people don't know this, but every bomb that's dropped, most of those bombs are spotted by, either SEALs or whatnot. Someone's got to be on the ground to spot those bombs.
Okay. Thank you, caller.
Well, I think the caller is so right on, which is there is no game plan. And I've been listening to every single one of those hearings. And when John Kerry is asked what will happen if Assad retaliates, he looks over at poor Chuck Hagel, who looks very forlorn. And Chuck says, we have plans. Well, they won't tell us what those plans are, but those plans are probably more bombing, and then there will be more retaliation. So the caller is spot on of saying this is just a slippery slope, and we are hearing from so many people who thought they would never be on the same side as Code Pink, and that is a lot of people in the military right now, people in the staffers of Congress. Went by our vigil last night and said, thank you for being here. You don't know how many staffers are with you. There is no game plan, and this is just a recipe for disaster. The American people are seeing through it. We see the image of Iraq all over again, and we don't like it.
Speaking of game plan, how many members of Congress will you plan to address as an organization, and how much of that will happen over the next week or so?
We will address as many of them as we can. We're going for the undecided, and we're going to the leaning towards no to make sure they stay in that direction. And we are really appealing to all people of the United States. This is the moment to make your voice known, whether you're doing it by picking up the phone or sending an email or signing a petition or getting out into the streets. You can go to codepink.org and find more information. Let's forget our ideological differences and work together as Americans to stop another war before it's